welcome back to my kitchen. Now, to celebrate the release of the new pasta covered fondant from Saracino, I'm going to be showing you how to make the cutest little teddy bear cake with these really pretty stripes, and also we've got a cute little bow on the top. Okay, so I'm going to start with my cake. Now, I've baked 3 5-inch cakes. So once I've filled my cake with ganache, it's going to be around 5 inches by 5 inches high. And I'm just going to add this between each of my layers before adding a crumb coat onto the outside. I can then go in with my final layer of ganache, just preparing it for our fondant. Now for this, I'm using my acrylic discs just to make sure I get it super smooth. And I have got a dedicated video that goes into a lot more detail how to get your cakes to this stage, which I will link to in the description below and on the screen. For today's cake, I'm going to be covering it in some of the Saracino fondant. So this is their pasta cover. Now, as well as the normal white, they've just released different colours. So I'm going to be using the baby blue and the slightly darker blue. Now, to create the texture on the cake, I'm going to be using this textured rolling pin. This one is from Prop Options and it's number 13. And you can see that it just has these vertical lines going all the way down. So it's going to give us a really fun effect on our cake. So I've taken my cake out of the fridge and that ganache has just firmed up. Now, in order to make our fondant stick onto the cake, I've just mixed some icing sugar with some cold boiled water. Now, so that I know exactly how much fondant I need, I'm going to be using my fondant guide. Now, if you don't have this already, I will put a link so you can download this guide yourself. Now, for this cake, I'm going to be using the paneling method. So instead of going all the way over the top, I'm going to do the top and the side separately to allow me to get those stripes. Now, I know that my cake is 5 inches in height and it's just over 4.5 inches. So I'm going to go 5 inches by 5 inches. So I know that I'm going to need around 468 grams of my fondant. Now, as you can see, this fondant is quite soft out of the packet. So I'm just going to knead that until it's a little bit more workable. So all I'm doing is just pushing the palm of my hand into that fondant, just pulling it round. And this is just going to make it a bit easier to work with and a bit more pliable. Now, if I pull that out, it is quite a stretchy fondant. So if you get elephant skin, or when you're covering your cakes, you find that it tears on that top edge, by using a fondant that has some elasticity to it, it really stops that happening. Okay, so I want to take some of this fondant to cover the top of my cake to start with. So using my fondant guide, I can see that for the top of a 5-inch cake, I need 85 grams of fondant. And you want to use a super sharp knife or craft knife. And I'm going to run this around the edge of my cake. So just using the side of my cake as a guide. Okay, so I've got the rest of my fondant and I want to roll this out into a panel. Now, to start with, I'm going to roll this out a little bit thicker than I need, as we'll be going in with that textured rolling pin. So as I roll that down, I'm just pulling it back just so we create a panel. Now, this is a really nice fondant to work with. It's quite a firm fondant, but it is quite easy to roll. First of all, I'm going to go in with my paddle smoother and just make sure that it's nice and smooth, as we won't be able to do this once we've added in that texture. I'm then going to take that rolling pin and I'm going to place that onto my fondant. Now, with a small amount of pressure, I'm just going to push all the way across. And this is a great one, as if you have to stop at any time, you'll be able to line that back up into the grooves that you've created. Now, I'm going to try and keep the same amount of pressure all the way down. And you can see we've got this really lovely texture. I'm then going to use a pizza cutter and first of all just cut along one of those lines. I then want to get a super straight line that's at a right angle to those stripes so that they'll look nice and straight on the cake. I'm going to work out how long it needs to be. I'm then going to very carefully roll that fondant up, keeping this edge completely in line. I'm then gonna push it against the side of my cake, and this is gonna be the back. And I'm just gonna unwind that all the way down. I can then carefully push it on. We don't wanna push it too much that we push out any of that texture. Now I'm just pushing that together with my fingers. Now I actually cut this the exact right size for the cake, but if you did have any overhang, use your craft knife, just go down and cut the excess and just push them together, just as I am here. Now because it is quite a firm fondant, I'm just going around just very lightly, not pushing in, but just making sure that it's pushed against the cake. And you can see we have these really lovely stripes. Now you can also run a small amount of water just around that inner edge, just to join two pieces of fondant together and just lightly push down. We then want to do exactly the same as we did to the top, so cut off any excess. And I'm just going to use my paddle smoother on the top edge of that cake, just smoothing it and just pulling it in slightly so it blends with the piece that we've already added. But there you can see we've got this really lovely texture on the front of our cake. Now we've got our cake, I want to create a bow to go on the top. Now to create some contrast between the light blue that we've put on the cake, I'm going to be using the slightly darker blue for my bow. Now, just like the lighter blue, it's quite soft to start with, but I'm just kneading that slightly, just so it's a bit more workable. Now, I'm not going to add anything to this fondant to help firm it up, as I want to show you just how good this fondant is on its own. Now I've rolled that out until it's around 4 millimeters in thickness. So I want this to be quite a chunky bow. And the reason for doing this is because I haven't added anything to the fondant. So we want it to be able to firm up and stand up on its own. Now for the main part of my bow, I need 3 pieces. Now creating bows is one of my favorite things to add onto cakes, as I just think they look so pretty. So my 2 main pieces are going to be 3 inches by 5 inches in length. I'm going to be folding these over, so when my bow is finished, it should be around 5 inches across, which will mean it will fit perfectly on the cake. For the piece in the middle, I'm going to make this 3 inches by 2 inches. Now to create the bow, I'm just going to be using a small amount of edible glue, and I've also got some pieces of kitchen paper. So what I'm going to do to start is take one of those larger pieces, add a small amount of edible glue just along that bottom line. I'm then going to take some of my kitchen paper and just scrunch this up. Place that in the center. So this is just going to stop it collapsing on itself whilst it dries. I'm then going to fold that over, and I want to pull it together, and we want to create some ruched marks in the center. Now I want this to sit on the top of my cake, so I'm going to pull that down slightly and just pop it onto my work surface and just help it stand up. So I'm going to do exactly the same to the other side. So if we bring that in, it's going to give us a bow shape. So I'm going to pinch those 2 bits together. So we want to bring that middle part closer to the bottom. Now, whilst I'll create the center part of my bow, I'm just going to lie it down. But you just want to make sure that you've got a line across the bottom. So once it starts to dry, gonna fit on the top of the cake. I'm then going to take that center piece, turning the outer edges in slightly. I'm then going to go back and forward, and I'm going to add on some edible glue. I then want to place it over that join before flipping it over and just pulling those together and trimming off the excess. And you can always go in with your dressing tool and just add a few more lines. So that's going to give us this super cute bow for the top. So I'm going to pop this to one side to dry. So I'm just going to dry it standing up. Now we've got our bow, I want to add the 2 ends of our bow draping down the cake. Now I cut the pieces for the bow quite wide, and I want these to look like they're made from the same bit of ribbon, but I'm going to make them just a tiny bit thinner, just so they don't cover all the texture on our cake. So I'm going to cut them 2.5 inches each by 7 inches. Now on the end of each of these, I'm going to come up around 1 inch and just cut out a triangle, just to give a nice finish to our ribbon. Now I want this to look like the bow has been tied in the middle. So we need the end to be a lot thinner. So I'm just going to start on one side, just pulling that in and then pulling it back on itself, just so we get kind of a drape. So I just want to place them on the cake, just coming over the top and meeting in the middle. And I want to keep them quite separate so we can still see that texture. Once I'm happy with the length of them, I'm going to cut them down at the top. I'm just cutting them at an angle, push them down to give a flat base for our bow. And you can always use just a little bit of tissue paper just to hold them in place, just while it dries. And I'm going to take just that little bit that I cut off and just place this at the back, just for now, so the bow's got something to lean onto. I can then remove that tissue paper, and it's still a little bit soft, so this helps me position that bow. And I can just cut off any excess that I can see from the back, just so it's nice from all angles. Once your bow is holding its shape, I can then take away those little bits of tissue paper and I can pop on our little teddy bear and just glue him into place. And if you want to see how I made this, I will leave a link in the description below and on the screen to a dedicated video showing step by step how I made him. So here we have the finished cake with these really pretty stripes using that rolling pin from Prop Options. We've got a cute little bow on the top and also this sweet little teddy bear. I really hope you've enjoyed this video tutorial and will be able to use some of these techniques in your own cakes. If you have enjoyed the video, as always, please don't forget to hit that like button. And if you'd like to see more videos like this and you haven't already, then don't forget to subscribe to the Cakes by Lynn's YouTube channel. Now, I will put a list of all the tools that I've used throughout today's video in the description below. So until next time, bye.